So white-tailed eagles were once widespread along the whole of the south coast from Cornwall to Kent, a long time ago, before being driven to extinction by persecution. The last pair in England nested on Culver Cliff on the Isle of Wight in 1780, a long time ago. So for that reason, one of the most exciting developments in recent years has been the reintroduction of white-tailed eagles to the island. Managing the project on the island is Steve Egerton-Read, who many of you will have met in the exhibition over the years. He's not only the person who feeds the young eagles and makes sure they have a good start, he's the public face of the project, not just to birders, but to local farmers too. And of course, some of them are very fearful that they will be losing some of their livestock to the eagles. We know that they're not likely to, but of course, it's an understandable concern. Steve has been a brilliant and fair communicator, and he's won huge support. And so our last speaker today, please give a very warm welcome to Steve Egerton-Read.
Cool. Well, thank you, Keith, for such a kind introduction. It's great to see so many of you here today. It's really bright down here, so I have a lot of empathy for everybody that has been stood here feeling like they're being dazzled. But hopefully you've all had a really nice day, had an opportunity to see some of the exhibits, and I've spoken to some of you already today, and my colleague Imogen, who's up in the bleachers, hiding. I'm sure you've had a chance to speak to her too. I know hopefully you've had a chance to buy some books as well. I can see there's still a few, but hopefully you've all won a raffle prize too. So without any further ado, I'm going to talk a little bit about the project. Just for quick reference, I work for Forestry England, but we work in partnership with the Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation to deliver this project here on the south coast of England. So I've got kind of 3 objectives for you today. There is an exam at the end, and no one's allowed to leave. The doors are locked, so you all have to pass. So the first is I want to provide you with a really broad understanding of white-tailed eagle ecology and their life history, and really kind of just set you with some basic grounding of how this species lives in the landscape. And then I'd like to try and highlight to you some of the core objectives of the project and really take you through kind of the key research objectives of the project to date, and kind of share as much of the up-to-date knowledge as I can with you in the short time that we have. And finally, hopefully this isn't too hard, because a lot of people have done work for me beforehand, but to send you away feeling really upbeat and actually really positive that we can make a difference to nature recovery, not in 10 years' time, not in 20 years' time, but actually today, tomorrow, and we can get on with it. But you are going to have to do some work. I know, silence. So I'm going to do this through, and I'm very pleased that Nigel earlier did a bit of audience participation as well. It was really, really helpful because he's warmed you up. I'm going to get you to do a show of hands as to whether you've seen a white-tailed eagle. So hands up if you have on the south coast of England. If you haven't seen it on the south coast of England, put your hand down though. Yes, but not here. Quite a few of you. Not yet. Just want me to put you the right way. Quite a few of you actually. Okay, that's interesting. Anyone not know what white-tailed eagle is? Okay, that's good. Well, I'm going to test you though, because it's amazing how many talks I do to bird groups, and invariably somebody will ask me at the end, what do they actually look like? So this is an adult white-tailed eagle. Hopefully you can still hear me as we look. White-tailed eagle, white tail. We're very imaginative in ornithology, right? And it's got this big, bright yellow bill, really heavy bill, really well adapted to tearing up fish. And then this beautiful, bright yellow eye, give the Scottish name, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, translates literally as the bird with the sunlit eye. Really poetic name. And then the feature I really like about this bird is they've got this bleach blonde look about them that a lot of my peers at high school had. But white-tailed eagles pull it off much better, in my opinion. And of course, for most of you, I suspect the most striking feature is this bird's enormous size. So it has that huge 2.5-metre wingspan. And we did have a banner out earlier, I don't know if any of you saw it, that kind of had the buzzard, I think it had a kestrel and a pigeon on it as well, and a white-tailed eagle. But for those of you that didn't see it, it's only a little bit taller than me. It's okay, I know I'm not 8 foot high. But the juvenile birds, you can see, are much darker. They're very dark eye, dark bill, and dark plumage overall. They do have some white in the tail, and they go through a series of molts till they get to that point that they're adult. But most of you probably already knew that bit, I'm hoping. But for those of you that didn't, there you are. So very briefly, the life history of this bird, it's a very long-lived species. It's a bird that can live into its 30s, although it's very rare. Most birds only live to around sort of 17 to 25. And they, once they reach maturity, which is 4 or 5 years old, they form these long monogamous pairs, these lifelong monogamous pairs. And they'll nest only once per year. If they're lucky, they'll raise 1, maybe 2 young a year. They're not successful every year, but they do try to breed most years. And they'll utilise a real variety of nesting situations. So you have pairs that will nest in trees across much of their range, and you might even have pairs that try to nest on the ground or on sea cliffs as well. And we'll see as the talk goes on just how extensive their range is. But until they reach breeding age, these young birds are really, really nomadic. They explore really widely, and I'm sure a lot of you would have seen some of the maps that the project has put out over the last 5-6 years, and we'll see some of them a little bit later. But this behaviour is really important in the context of this translocation, because what happens is they go all over the place, and then once they reach breeding maturity, they return to where they believe home to be. And this is a behaviour known as natal phylopatry. Now remember that term, because I might ask you about it later. And broadly speaking, these birds live largely in and around wetland habitats. So these could be freshwater wetlands, they could be coastal wetlands, so it could be some of the places that Chris was talking about earlier, like the harbours around the south coast of England. They could be places like Blashford Lakes or rivers along the south coast of England. A whole variety of situations, but wetlands are key because their favoured food is fish when it's available, but they also take a range of other things, and they're very generalist in their diet, very Catholic in their diet indeed. And this is a bird that is as an apex predator, sits right on top of the food chain. So what that means is actually it does have an impact on those mid-level predators that sit below it. So it plays an important ecological role in suppressing the activities of those other raptorial birds. And then, as a lot of other predatory birds within the Northern Hemisphere, they perform a role in terms of removing carrion from the landscape and recycling nutrients. They're not too shy about an easy meal. So this map, I actually updated it for this talk, and now I realise it's really hard to see for me. But you'll see this bird's got a really broad geographic range, right away through sort of Greenland, Iceland, reintroduced into Scotland and Southwest Ireland. There's a population here in sort of Northwest Europe, all the way over to Far East Asia. Oh, too far. But in the context of Western Europe, or in the context of Europe as a whole, you'll notice there's actually a really big gap here. And that's really important for us to understand, was this bird actually ever here to begin with? And the answer is, yes, it was. It was really widespread. It was widespread across the entirety of Europe. Western Europe is the last place really in its range where it's still very, very rare. And for us in the British Isles, we know this because we've got this map here on the left. All these black dots are place names that indicate the presence of eagles. So these are all derived from the Old English word for eagle being ern. So the nearest place I know of to us is a place called Arne in Dorset, but there's also a place here in Sussex, and there's a couple of places, sort of looks like home counties, some of you might know, and you might, I don't know, you might fancy trying to figure out what some of them are, but I can't remember any of the others. But turn around the other way. And on the map on the right for you guys, these are all the the fossil finds of white-tailed eagles. So you can see, okay, there's not as many, but the bird is nonetheless widely distributed across the British Isles. And we know that also this bird was quite prominent in our culture at some point in our history. So if you look at all these maps, so you've got map A through to G, and you'll see all these dots are archaeological evidence of white-tailed eagles, so evidence around human settlements. And you'll see there's like this real abundance in the Roman period and in the Iron Age, where this bird was really highly revered and really important within the culture of the people here in the British Isles. And very sadly, our relationship changes, as you see actually, from the maps in the medieval period and Saxon period. Our relationship changes with this bird, and they get seen as competition for fish. This was a Catholic country during the medieval period, so we ate fish on Fridays, and any bird that ate fish was persecuted. And then gradually this bird became rarer and rarer, and into more recent history, it was seen as competition for livestock and for game as well. And the bounties paid on these birds were significant and attracted a lot of interest. And regrettably, as Keith already mentioned, by the late 18th century, this bird was extinct here on the south coast of England. And by the early 20th century, the bird was extinct from the British Isles as a whole. A really, really sad story, but it gets better. It's okay. That's the most doom and gloom slide we'll see today. You can all relax. Well, not too much. You've got a quiz later. But the bird has recovered in the latter half of the 20th century and into the 21st century across much of its range. So here in the British Isles, already mentioned, been reintroduced. So it's actually the 50th anniversary this year of the reintroductions on the Isle of Rum in 1975. And there's now about 150 to 180 pairs in Scotland as a whole. I won't go into too much detail. You can read about that. And there's much better authorities to talk about it than I. And also the bird was reintroduced into Ireland in the late 2000s, and actually has been ongoing translocations in the late 2010s into the early 2020s. So there's somewhere around 10 to 20 pairs in Ireland now, but there probably will be a lot more in the not too distant future. And there's been this gradual natural expansion in Western Europe. So there's now around 30 to 40 pairs in the Netherlands, which is the nearest population to us. And there's also a handful of pairs establishing in France, alongside other reintroductions that are going on in Western Europe. So there's a program in Asturias in Spain, and there's also a program near Lake Geneva in France. And there are, of course, as many of you probably are aware, proposals for southwest England, so southeast Wales, and for Cumbria in the British Isles. So that's kind of a very broad background. So I'm just going to quickly take you through some of the sort of key aspects of the project for you to understand going forward. So, of course, the project is licensed by Natural England. So Natural England allow us to release birds here on the south coast of England and actually on the Isle of Wight. So Natural England granted a license for us to release 60 birds from 2019, initially over a 5-year period up to 2024. Unfortunately, due to factors beyond our control, 22 and 23 were really bad years for us, and we weren't able to release the birds we wanted to. So we actually have an extension of the project now to run till 2026, where we'll carry on trying to get as close to that 60 as we can. To date, we've released 37 in that period. So we actually collect birds from the British Isles. So the population in Scotland is healthy enough, strong enough, that we can take a small number of birds each year from wild nests in Scotland. So we collect birds at roughly 7 weeks old from these nests, and we translocate them to the Isle of Wight. Again, licensed by Nature Scot, who are Natural England's equivalent in Scotland. And really what we want to see from this translocation is an initial sort of 6 to 10 breeding pairs within 50 to 60 kilometres of the Isle of Wight. And that will be enough to sustain a population going forward. And of course, all these projects, as Keith's already mentioned, there were concerns initially, and concerns were very broad from a whole range of stakeholders. So the project is overseen by a steering group and a monitoring evaluation group, and Hoss actually sit on that group, and Keith is your representative. So I think we've got a meeting next week, Keith, haven't we? Yeah. So you guys have a stake in this, and your voices are heard as well, so it's really important to know. But one thing that always amuses me about this project is that the birds' first flights are not from a nest in Scotland, they're not from an aviary on the Isle of Wight, they are in a little Cessna plane pootling down to Bembridge Airfield, which is one of the most bizarre places I've ever been in my life, and I grew up on the Isle of Wight. That wasn't a joke about the Isle of Wight, it's a joke about Bembridge Airfield, just to clarify. But there's a serious note to this, in that actually lots of people give their time to this project and their expertise, and without the expertise of these people, these projects just simply don't happen. Like the people that fly the plane, they do so voluntarily, they give their time, their fuel, their resources to make sure that the project can work and to make it easier for the birds to come down. And that extends to a whole range of people, from people that help monitor the birds in the field, feeding birds, and collecting the birds, and all these skills that are absolutely necessary. And then when they fly from Bembridge Airfield, they get transported to these really luxurious pens, lovingly made by us, and they spend about 4 to 6 weeks in these pens, getting a really kind of eclectic diet of conger eel, ballan wrasse, cuckoo wrasse, maybe a bit of rabbit if they're lucky, all things that I can recommend if you want, and I have stores of ready. And we chop them into these like tiny little pieces, like finger-thick width pieces. You don't need an axe, like Chris, you can use a knife to cut these things up. And then after about 4, 5, 6 weeks, we fit them with these really amazing little devices. And these devices, these GPS devices, are attached like on a harness. They will sit on the bird like a rucksack. And they're no bigger than a mobile phone. They weigh about 50 grams. And the best thing about them is that you can send a text message to a white-tailed eagle. They've all got these mobile phone SIM cards in them. They never write back, just to clarify. But what that means is that we can change the transmission cycle remotely. We can change the number of points that the bird collects, or the device collects. And we can even set up like these little grids on the map where there's places of interest. We can request more data. But all do it just by sending a text. Really incredible information. And these devices have really are what effectively allow us to understand what we've understand, what I'm about to share with you now. Oh, there we go. So the first thing is, they go just about everywhere. So this is already out of date. Every time I do one of these maps, it takes me about 45 minutes to an hour to do it. And then a bird does something totally different, makes it out of date. It's really frustrating. But you'll see from this map, of course, unsurprisingly, there's lots of yellow tracks around southern England. But there are these little hotspots, like Exmoor National Park, the southwest coast estuaries here, northeast Norfolk, North York Moors, southeast Scotland, Cape Wrath, and even the Cairngorms. But what's more fascinating for us is to understand what individuals do. This is okay, yeah, great. So there's two birds I'm going to focus in on for you. And I have to tell you, all these birds have very elaborate names. So the bird in blue, you can see on that screen there, is G463. And the bird in yellow is G466. Fortunately, I don't have any children, so... So both of these birds were released in 2020. So you'll see this is all the data from sort of August through till the end of that year. So you'll see the bird in yellow stayed on the Isle of Wight pretty much all the winter. And then the bird in blue, he had a little trip down to Land's End, this is his point, and he settled near Chard in Somerset. Anyone from Chard? No? I've not been there yet. I'd like to go and have a look. It's interesting for an eagle, so must be cool. And in 2021, suddenly these birds move around a lot more. So actually from the spring of 21, that's when these birds started to explore really widely. So you'll see the bird in yellow went all the way up to Scotland, but also made journeys around southwest England. Bird in blue, after having winter in Chard, decided to go up to Norfolk and to the Suffolk coast. But then he became the first bird to travel across the English Channel. He actually made like 3-4 attempts to try and get across, and then eventually went for it. Went through France, Belgium, Netherlands. These are all places with lots of white-tailed eagles along the Wadden Sea coast here, and spent pretty much most of the summer sort of going between Denmark and the sort of Dutch-German border there. And then later in the year, he came back. So in November of that year, he returned and finished the year sort of in Suffolk and Norfolk. 2022, so this is a totally different set of data. Looks very similar, right? Yeah. They pretty much did the same thing again. Both birds did the same thing. And notably, they went back to exactly the same spots. You think back to that map. Here you are, look. Same places. Am I right? Yeah, yep. Southwest England, Cape Wrath, and the yellow bird ended in Poole Harbour. And the blue bird, again, Biesbosch in Netherlands, Wadden Sea coast. All right, long weekend in southern Sweden. Came back, ended up in Poole Harbour. 2023. No exploration. What was that word? What was that phrase? I can't remember it. Natal what? Natal Photo Factory. And we go forward to last year. Same thing again. Those two are now on territory. They are paired together. They will not leave that territory. And that's why this project works. Despite the fact that these birds end up going to places where there are plenty of other white-tailed eagles that they can meet, that behaviour is really important in the context of the translocation and also in the context of their natural recovery. This is why we don't see white-tailed eagles turning up on the south coast of England regularly and staying. One more. There's actually a little video. It works. Oh no. Look at them. Tiny. They're a few days old, those chicks. So one of the other things the devices allow us to do is actually identify the trees that eagles are nesting in. So they're really helpful in monitoring what the birds are doing in the wider landscape. These birds operate over large territories, sort of talking 10 to 30, even more square kilometres. Some cases 50, 60 square kilometre size territory. So trying to find out which tree the birds are going to is not necessarily that easy. So the satellite data really helps us in understanding that. And you think that these tiny little chicks within 11 weeks will be as big as their father there. Really amazing. It's a really cool video, but we haven't got time. But perhaps the most important thing for us to understand in the context of the recovery of this bird is what these birds are eating. That is the one thing that vast majority of people have concerns over in the context of the recovery of this apex predator. What will the birds eat? And that could be from a livestock farming perspective, it could be from a game rearing perspective, it could be from a fisheries perspective, or it could even be from a conservation perspective. Conflict with habitats and species of conservation concern, which we all know exist in this part of the country. And also, in order to talk about the recovery of a species, it's important for us to understand what the birds are eating so we can identify potential sources of contamination, whether that be things like lead that are well known to be issues for white-tailed eagles across much of their range and other predatory birds. And this will really help facilitate the wider recovery of this bird within the UK. Now, white-tailed eagles are studied in terms of their diet across their range really well. This is a bird that's of interest to people across all of Europe and into Asia. And actually, the vast majority of people study white-tailed eagle diet by recovering prey remains from nests. I can't remember, what age do eagles nest? Anybody remember? 4 or 5, yeah. So we release them at about 12, 13 weeks old. It's a long time to be waiting to find out what happens, right? So we've had to adapt, we've had to innovate in order to make sure that we can provide those answers for people now and not having to wait for years and years to come. And that's really been made possible by a few things. So there's full-time staff, so there's myself and Imogen, and there's also a team from Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation that are able to facilitate that. But there's also you guys, recorders, county recorders, all the way across southern England, who are really interested to find out more about these birds. And equally, we have these really high-resolution GPS devices that we can send text messages to. Makes life much easier. So we actually do it just by standing in the field and watching birds for hours, and I'll show you a short clip in a second. And that not only provides us a sort of broad overview of what diet is made up of, but allows us to understand how birds are acquiring these meals in diet as well, how these items are acquired is really important. Kind of confirms these key foraging areas for white-tailed eagles going forward. And in combination with utilising GPS devices, we can actually understand what impact age might have on diet as well. So we understand what immature birds eat, but also we might understand what breeding individuals are eating too. Now, I promised you high-quality footage, didn't I? So we stand at vantage points. Gosh, really wobbly, isn't it? And this is a juvenile white-tailed eagle. It's a third calendar year bird. And you can see he's hunting a cormorant. Cormorant dives and dives and dives. Notice in the corner here, all these tufted ducks don't give a crap, do they? And as you actually see how many species you can pick out just by not watching the eagle. There's some Canada geese there that aren't bothered. There's a marsh harrier up there. A few cormorants that aren't being bothered by an eagle. Anybody think he's going to catch it? Oh, there's a bit of a mixed response. Still going, isn't he? This was one of those days where it was like those really horrible easterly winds. I lost all sensation in my face and my hands. And yeah. And the answer is still going. This wasn't as long a video when I played it. I was prepping this talk. I think he's going to give up. There you go. Sorry, I'm not very good at capturing anything on video, as you can probably tell. So to sort of provide you a little bit of an overview of how we collect the data. So for that instance, we understand that a bird's hunting, right? We can see what's going on, but that's not always really obvious. We might have I'll show you some observations that friends and colleagues have sent in to me over the years. But the key thing is we collect the date, where it was, and we do collect more accurate representation. I use this slide for a lot of things. We can identify the bird's ring number, can understand how a bird's taken. In some cases unknown, and then we can usually get a broad taxa group for it, and sometimes we might get a few other bits too, and then there's space for comments. And this is one of the examples. So what do we think? Has that eagle got anything? Do you think it's got anything? Yeah. We can zoom in. It's not that clear, is it? Luckily, I was there at the time, and this is my friend's photo, and it's a bird, and that's all we know. Could be any kind of bird, but it's a bird. It's kind of useful. Other photos again. Right. I haven't got a clue what that bird is, but there's a lot of feathers, aren't there? So again, we know it's feathers, bird. That's a little bit clearer, isn't it? Kind of know what's happened there. That coot's been caught by that eagle, and his mate really wants it. And in other cases, you get these really stunning kind of sequences. So here's an eagle, actually one of the eagles we were talking about in the map, G463. He's pursuing this osprey with a big mullet, and you see the mullet gets dropped. And he catches it, and then the osprey thinks he can get it back. I think that's a bit ambitious. Could really use this eagle on my cricket team, actually. Good catch. But we can kind of group all those observations together, and even ones that don't have the full kind of complement of information, we can still find use for them within that. So it's a great example of citizen science as well. I hope you understand, and this is clearly citizen science is something that's really important to HOS too. So we can group this in together, and we can have a look at the broad sort of taxa composition. See that birds, slightly out of date, but most of this is still quite accurate. Birds is the most important group overall at 36%. Fish, about 25. Mammals, 24. Mollusks, which is only cuttlefish, common cuttlefish on the Solent shore. And then, because, as we agree, can't always tell what's going on, some things are unidentified. So I'm going to get you guys to do some work. So you guys are all birders, all ornithologists, all of interest. So we've got 750 observations, or much more than that now, of eagles feeding in southern England. 36% of those are birds. Which of these species do you think is the most common in diet? And I'm going to go through them all, and then I'll get you to raise your hands. I'll do it again. So we've got Eurasian coot, got ring-necked pheasant, Canada goose, or Eurasian curlew. Hands up for Eurasian coot. Quite a few of you. Really won over by that photo, eh? Ring-necked pheasant, 40 million released every year. Canada goose. Okay. Anyone for Eurasian curlew? Oh, not many people taking my bait. It's not coot, it's not pheasant, it is Canada goose. Canada goose is the most abundant bird in our wetlands year-round, right? A lot of these other things, they have turned up, but they're not there all around. Eurasian coot, really rare bird here on the south coast of England in the summer, right? But in winter, there's lots of them. Ring-necked pheasant, yeah, they're really abundant, but not as abundant in our wetlands where this bird principally lives. And coot actually does feature quite a lot in diet, to be fair, but not as abundant as Canada goose. Got another one. We all ready? So, how do you think these birds acquire most of their meals? Live prey? Carrion? Pirated from their predators? Or do I just feed them all day long? Hands up for live prey. Quite a few of you. Carrion? Quite a lot of you. Pirated from other predators? Do I dare ask for the next one? Anybody think I feed them all day? Ah, Julie, very kind. The answer is live prey is the most important element in diet for white-tailed eagles. But do we think white-tailed eagle diet is influenced by seasons or by age? Yes? No? Or maybe that was your next question. Maybe you're tired of this game. Hands up for yes? Quite a lot of you. You're getting the theme. Anybody for no? And anybody just want me to go on with it? Yeah. Well, here's the answer. So we talk about birds released in the first year birds. See how much mammals feature in diet, and then gradually that steps off. And then we go fish in the green. Really high by the time they get to the 6th calendar year, right? We can do the same thing for feeding strategy. Look how important carrion is for those really young birds. But for older birds, barely features at all. It's less than 10%. So, I think you know what's coming next, right? What do you think the most common item in the diet of the breeding pair in England is? We have a pair bred the last couple of years. Do you think it's mammals, birds, fish, or do you think I'm silly enough to say we don't know? Hands up for mammals. Hands up for birds. Quite a few of you. Fish. Most of you. Anyone think I'm going to say unidentified? No. And the answer is fish. So you can see the diet composition from April to August. So the breeding season starts, well, the chip rearing season starts in April, and birds are fledged by by late July usually. So here we are. 80% of diet nearly was made up of fish in April last year. 70%, sorry. So that's a really whistle-stop tour. So I'm going to try and recap these objectives, and I'm going to get you by show of hands or by murmuring, whichever you prefer. Do you feel you've got a really broad understanding of white-tailed eagle diet and ecology? White-tailed eagle ecology and the history in the British Isles now? Yes, no? Yes. Yeah? Great. It's your understanding of a project, its research objectives, and actually has your perception of diet been challenged as well today? Yeah? And do you feel really positive that we can do something? This is a project, if we rewind to 2018, 2019, a lot of people were really unsure about what the outcome might be, and of course we're still in early days of the project, but you can do something. All of you in this room can have a real big impact. This is a project that's run by a relatively small number of people in context of the world, and we're getting on with it. So hopefully you feel really positive, and we can overcome the challenges ahead, which are, as we all know, numerous. So finally, feel free to take a photo of this slide if you want. I realise that blog post is really out of date, but there is a more recent video. We do have social media channels, and if you're coming to the Isle of Wight, which I highly recommend, and if you're the lucky auction winner, you might be coming to the Isle of Wight, I recommend coming via East Cowes, where you can see this gorgeous mural that was painted by a local artist with an eagle with a cuttlefish over the seagrass beds of the Solent on this enormous building. This is the Columbine building in East Cowes. It's 12 metres high, so I think this is the biggest eagle in England. So yeah, thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.